My name is Itegesu, and I'm a senior researcher at European Forest Institute. And together with my colleague Rina, I will co-host, co-moderate this session, Investigative Journalism. A bit of framing and background about this session. As you know, over the years, journalists and media organizations have widely reported about silent issues relating to global forest governance. However, traditional media is no longer the only source of information. In today's digital environment, anyone can create, upload, and share information on internet and through social media. And at the same time, science-based investigative journalism is on rise, using tools developed by research organizations and follow the works of scientists to identify the leads to stories. And on the other hand, scientists have reportedly cautioned against distortion of scientific facts and seemingly findings in journalistic reporting, and especially in media, social media. And therefore, we dedicated one work package within the NewGo project to look at science media inquiry on forest governance in social media. And this is why we are taking a unique approach to offering a platform to these two communities, journalists and scientists with different worldview, different timelines, and so on, to meet at IFPM. So by bringing two journalists who have carried out investigative stories in the tropics, this session aims to bring knowledge gap by uncovering how this investigative journalism have worked with scientific communities. So before passing the virtual speaker to Rina, my colleague, to introduce the speakers and also moderate and give us an overview of the program of the session, I strongly encourage participants to drop the questions in the Q&A chat box, and then we will summarize and then come back to that and discuss at a later stage. Rina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ita. Hi, everyone. I'm Rina. And at the European Forest Institute, we've been running different initiatives to build a bridge between science and media by experimenting with different digital tools and new techniques for the past 5 years. As Ita mentioned, without a doubt, digitalization has transformed different aspects of our professional and personal lives. It has changed the ways journalists conduct their research and scientists communicate about research outcomes more effectively. As Ita mentioned, under NewGo, a project funded by German Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture, we've conducted an analysis called Out of the Flames, which you will see on the screen if you turn to the next slide. One of the elements we've explored was the role of science and media in social media conversation. By taking a case study approach focusing on the Amazon rainforest fires, we have found out that during this global event, scientific voices were almost absent, marginal, or only present at the periphery in social media conversation. So that's not really good news for science communities. However, on the contrary, media articles were among the most shared URL destinations on social media like Twitter. And many of these articles treated scientific voices as trustworthy source of information. As the media play a significant role in connecting scientific knowledge to a broader public, we decided to organize this session at IFPM to explore how journalists conduct their journalistic research with a focus on investigative journalism and how scientific communities may be able to work better with the media. Unlike news reporters, which you may be working on a day-to-day basis, investigative journalists take the time to research issues in depth. They are also increasingly using different digital tools and science-based approaches to carry out original work. For that reason, if you can turn to the next slide, we are really grateful to have two journalists who have conducted science-based investigations on deforestation issues and the tropics to add this session. so that we can get to know behind the scenes of how they carry out their investigative work and discuss some of the challenges they have faced in the process. So with this, I would like to introduce Alexandra Hill, a visual storytelling reporter at the Financial Times. Alex was formerly with the Bureau for Investigative Journalism, where she conducted a series of investigations on the links between global commodity trade and deforestation in the Amazon. We'll hear more about how the team closely collaborated with TRACE, developed by the Stockholm Environment Institute. We also have Madeleine Nganga, editor of Info Congo and also Pulitzer Center's Rainforest Investigations Fellow. Madeleine has focused on forest governance issues in the Congo Basin and using satellite imagery, and also worked with a number of forest-focused organizations like C4 and FERN. So we will invite both Alex and Madeleine to present first before we move on to the panel discussion that will be moderated by Ita. We'll then take some time for Q&A, and therefore it'd be really nice if you could make use of the chat box to send us the questions as we go. We will, of course, try our best to cover all the questions from you, but since we have the limited time, we may end up selecting a few questions relevant to the speakers as well as the audience in the room. So on that note, I'd like to invite Alex first, if that's okay with you, Alex.
Hi there. Yes, thank you. Just checking you can see. Oh, there we go. I couldn't see myself, but now I can. Hi there. And I'm just going to share my screen. Just do this now. Can you all see my presentation?
Not yet.
Okay, that's weird. Let me just. Okay, that's having a bit of problem with that. It might be. Do you have my presentation, Rina? Would you be able to share it?
You do have, no?
Yeah, we do.
Okay,
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Okay, that's good. I'm glad we shared that in advance. It's always good to have that backup. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to talk. I'll try and keep it brief. So as Rina mentioned, I'm at the Financial Times. On the visual storytelling team there. I've been there since last July, but prior to that, I was at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, which is a non-profit investigative journalism agency, as it says on the tin, based in London, but doing global coverage and global stories. And we were kind of digging in. I was on the global environment team there, and we were digging into Brazilian deforestation for nearly 3 years. And we were kind of still doing this when I left, and they are still looking into this this topic now. So I'm going to talk you through some of the stories that we did. If you would like to, if you don't mind going on to the next slide, please, Rina. Perfect. So we started digging into this kind of subject area in January 2019. And it actually started, we didn't actually set out to do a series on deforestation. At the time, we were our brief as a team was to investigate global corporate agribusiness. So that could be anything related to these massive agribusiness companies. And we decided to start looking into the Brazilian meat packers because these were giant companies, some of the biggest meat companies in the world and some of the biggest meat exporters. They were shipping a lot of meat to the UK and Europe. They had hardly been covered in any mainstream British press. And probably even European, but we knew for sure that they had hardly been covered in our media landscape. They had been tied to, some of the companies such as JBS had been tied to big national corruption scandals in Brazil. So we just thought these were a really important companies to cover that had massively expanded from the mid-noughties after a kind of tranche of Brazilian government funding to go from being national exporters to being huge, or sorry, national companies to being huge exporters and some of the biggest meat companies in the world. So we started looking at them, and we were going to do any sorts of stories on them. We published our first set of stories 6 months later in the July of 2019, and we did a story on deforestation, we did a story on corruption, and a story on meat hygiene. And it quickly became clear that the deforestation one was, it had the biggest reaction, more stories kind of came out of it, like it seemed like it had the most kind of, it was the richest seam, and it also felt like just the most important one because of the global climate crisis, and just everything kind of shifted our focus to continuing to focus solely on the deforestation stuff. So in terms of, so these are the main investigations we did over 2.5 years. And then between those, we always, as investigative journalists, we would always cover kind of news stories related to the companies or the patch kind of Brazilian Amazon deforestation, because that's what kind of tells your audience that you're covering this and encourages people to get in touch with tips and things like that. But yeah, this slide, which I'm sure Rena could share with people if they're interested, has the links to our main investigations. So if you wouldn't mind moving on a slide, Rena. Thank you. Yeah, so those are the stories, and all of them were co-published with The Guardian. They were our publishing partner for the whole duration of the series. That's because the Bureau is obviously a tiny agency, so everything we do, we co-publish with bigger partners to give it big audiences. And we also did all of the beef stories with Reporter Brazil, who I will, well, I'll explain on the next slide. So if you wouldn't mind. Yeah. So so what we found, I'll just talk about this kind of first story that we did. So this story felt like the first time the kind of British media, at least, had done an original story on the beef industry's causation of Amazon deforestation. So I think a lot of people in the UK before would have known that soya was driving deforestation, because that has been a major in the 2000s and had led to a big kind of deforestation agreement. But beef, it just didn't seem as well known. And there may have been some studies covered, but there wasn't really anything kind of original reporting on this. So we felt like we were kind of putting the issue of the beef trade on the agenda by doing this story. So we basically found that a farming company in the Amazon that was supplying cattle to JBS was illegally grazing cattle on land that had been illegally deforested. So this was our case study. And then we had that backed up by exclusive research from a project called Trace, that I will explain in a minute. But their research, for the first time, it was kind of unprecedented research, really, linked the Brazilian beef trade as a whole to nearly 6,000 square kilometers a year of deforestation in the country. And it found that 290 square kilometers of that was linked to JBS's exports alone. And JBS is one of the biggest meat companies in the world. At the time we were doing this, it was the biggest, and it probably still is, but I can't guarantee that, having not looked at it for a while. But this was huge. And so any investigation that is about a systemic issue such as deforestation, the best ones always have a case study that kind of digs into like the kind of facts around this is happening in one particular case and provides the color, which is what we as journalists use to describe what makes the story interesting. What makes people want to read it is they want to read about these cattle in the sun grazing in the Amazon on some land that used to be full of vegetation, and that's the case study. And then you have the wider data which suggests that that case study is not a lone bad apple and that it is happening wider. And so that's how what we did and what we found in our first story. And then on the next slide, these are our findings from our following stories that we did over our investigations over the next 2 years. But I won't go describe all those just because of time constraints, but they're on the links are on there. And so on the next slide, I'll talk you through how we did our beef stories. So we partnered with an organization called Reporter Brazil, they are basically kind of similar to the Bureau to our organization, but over in Brazil. They're a non-profit human rights and investigative journalism organization. They're absolutely incredible. They operate in kind of the face of a lot of threats against them, and they've been covering human rights and Amazon deforestation for years. And we partnered up with them, and we had kind of unprecedented access to some previously inaccessible records, government records, which show the movement of consignments of cattle from one farm to another farm and from farms to slaughterhouses. So every time a group of cattle is moved somewhere in the country, these records have to be filled in. And these showed us which farms had been directly supplying the meat companies such as JBS, their slaughterhouses. And then it was a case of looking at other government data, such as satellite data on deforestation, which shows, I was going to show you on my screen, but I can't share it, but it's all available from Brazilian government websites, and shapefiles of exactly where deforestation had been taking place over the last 10, 20 years. And then shapefiles, NASA satellite footage of fires, and you can see where the fires have been taking place, government records of fines for illegal deforestation, and property records. So it's a case of it's kind of a mapping software, which I think Madeleine also probably uses same one. It's called QGIS, and it's a case of mapping them all over each other to kind of show what had been going on these farms that had either directly or indirectly been supplying these slaughterhouses. And so that's kind of like how we did it our end. And then on the next slide, I'll talk you through how we worked with Trace. So Trace is a partnership between Global Canopy and the Stockholm Environment Institute, using big data really for transparency relating to deforestation. And I think we came across them because I was Googling to try and find statistics and data on deforestation linked to the beef industry. And they might have published like one blog post or something at this point. And then I contacted them, or they maybe had done all their data analysis on soya and other commodities. And then I contacted them saying, I don't suppose you have anything on beef. And they said, oh, funny that we're actually working on this as we speak. So they were doing, again, unprecedented research because they had unprecedented access to previously inaccessible data that meant they were able to do this. And they said, okay, you can have it. It was good timing. They said you can have it exclusively for your first story. And that was just brilliant because it meant that we had that wider data to suggest that our case study was not a lone issue. And then we continued working with them on every story we did for the next 3 years. We cited their research, and we also, when we moved on to soya, we also cited their research for the soya deforestation in the Cerrado region of Brazil. So that was just really invaluable and a really fruitful partnership. And the last slide, I was just going to talk about the impacts of the series. It's obviously always very difficult to know exactly what your specific stories have caused. You can never really know that. But in terms of immediate things that happened, a couple of examples that came to mind were a leaked investment and analysts report that was done by an analyst at HSBC was that we saw basically is advice to investors really, and it said that it cited our research, like all of our articles, and most of the report was basically based on this, and it basically said how risky investments in JBS were because of this deforestation, and that they needed to see action on it. And that was really great to see kind of investors talking about this stuff and directly talking about our research. Immediately after our soya stories, we had there was an angry exchange of letters between the Brazilian soya industry and campaigners in the Financial Times, citing our findings. So that was kind of stuff that you can directly tell, but then all of that is part of a bigger ecosystem of, and other articles as well contributed, but we like to think ours played a big part. There was global like threats from a kind of coalition of investors to divest from Brazilian beef. And there was also, if they didn't kind of cut deforestation. Last summer, EU supermarkets cut out Brazilian beef, and some British ones have done that too, I think. JBS announced that it would start monitoring deforestation and eliminate it amongst its indirect suppliers. So the farms that supply them, which is the huge problem that we kind of were focusing on. And there are obviously bills in kind of motion in the EU level and at the UK, and I think in various parts of the US, trying to look at making it illegal to import products linked to deforestation, illegal deforestation at least. So yeah, that's the kind of overview. I think I've spoken for just over 10 minutes, so I will stop there. Sorry, it was a whistle-stop tour, but there we go.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was really great overview. And yeah, we're going to make sure to share your slides with everyone else so that everyone can take a look closely with to the reporting that you have done. Before I pass the floor to Madeleine, so yeah, we started like 10 minutes late or so. So we're going to be borrowing some time, like 7 minutes from the coffee break, just for everyone's note. Yeah, so that means we will have another 20-ish minutes to cover the Madeleine the talk, and followed by the panel discussion and Q&A. So Madeleine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rina, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel. Today we are going to share, like Alexandra did, and share experience in the Congo Basin. So I don't know if you could help me with the slides. Okay, so like Rina said, I'm Madeleine Gunga. I'm fellow at the Pulitzer Center Rainforest Investigation Network. Is a new network of journalists, investigative journalists from the 3 main rainforest regions of the world, so the Amazon, the Congo Basin, and the Southeast Asia. We are working on cross-border collaborative reports, linking environmental crime, deforestation, and politics and financial issues at the transnational level. And I also work for InfoCongo as editor. InfoCongo is a platform of geojournalism in the Congo Basin region. And we cover the 6 countries of the Congo Basin rainforest: the Cameroon, Congo, DRC, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and Central African Republic. So we cover environmental issues like land grabbing, deforestation, wildlife trafficking, and all these precious environmental challenges we have in the rainforest countries. So today, I would like to discuss about the investigating political, social, and environmental factor driving the deforestation in the Congo Basin. How do we process? How do we work when we do our investigation in the Congo Basin rainforest, and what we found? So first, can we go to the next slide, please? I would like to share with you the recent story, one of our recent story. We published this story just recently, and we work on it for about 1 year as a Pulitzer Center fellow. And we found that an agro-industrial company was trying to take a great portion of land, about 16,000 hectares, to have a palm oil plantation. So it's not something new, because many NGOs write reports about it, but we wanted to know how these agro-industrial plantation are coming in the Congo Basin, because we read so many scientist reports saying that the Congo Basin is the new frontier for agro-industrial plantations, that agro-industrial company will come in the Congo Basin to have their plantation because of many factors. So we decided to know how this work, and have a focus area as Cameroon, and we decided to investigate about this new palm oil plantation called Camvet. So last year we spent all the time investigating how this company was working, and we found that the company was working, raised the forest, 2.5 thousand hectares of forest have been cleared in that area. It's an area overlapping with indigenous land, and also not far from a protected area in South Cameroon. So many impacts are already visible in that area. Indigenous community suffering a lot from the implementation, the arrival of the agro-industrial plantation in their area, and how do we proceed to do that? Next slide, please. So we started first with the review literature. This means we tried to read all the reports published about this issue by NGOs, other journalists, and our colleagues. And when we tried to get more information, when we got more information about this, we tried to locate the area, because we are working in a journalism platform. This means we do not just focus on going on field reporting and have interviews. We try to combine a lot of tools to have more accurate information to share with our readers. So we try to get geolocalization information about the area, and we also use GLAD alerts. So in Global Forest Watch, you may know the platform is a monitoring platform, forest monitoring platform worldwide, Global Forest Watch. So they cover a lot of rainforest countries, but also other countries of the world. So they have this new alert called RAD alert, when you can see like 10-meter forest degradation using satellite imageries. So we're trying to analyze this using Global Forest Watch platform to identify the area, to see if it was possible for us to have some alerts already visible on satellite imageries. When we found that alerts were visible on satellite images, we combined this with official document from the government, because government granted a portion of land to the company to forest company to cut the wood before the plantation, the agro-industrial plantation start their activities. So we try to combine the portion of land that have been attributed for forest clearing with the RAD alerts we were seeing in Global Forest Watch platform, to observe how many the portion of land, the portion of forest that have already been clear during during a specific period of time. So after analyzing this, we try to discuss with civil society organization, because in that area in South Cameroon, we have a lot of civil society organizations who started alerting that government wanted to give the land to an agro-industrial plantation, and it was a real danger. It was putting in danger village life and also communities living there. So there are a lot of actors working on this topic to really cover it, to really make a pressure to government to reconsider their decision. So we try to partner with those organizations to know how to go on field in safe way, and how to get in touch with direct community impacted by this new palm oil plantation project. This helped us to plan well our field trip. And when we went on field trip, we said, okay, we have satellite images, data. How do we make sure that these data are really accurate, or this data really match with the field trip data? So we try to use GPS coordinates of the area we're visiting. When on field with cameras and all those tools, you know, sure. And we try to get coordinate of area where we have elephant rampages, deforestation appear, and then we combine this field data where we have geo-coordinate with the satellite images data to be sure that we are in the same area and we are speaking about the same issue. Then we had interview with specialists and work on visual that can really attract our readers. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is the type of data we use for this specific story we decided to share with you today. When making our research, we found that there were management plan of protected area in Cameroon that have been published. So we use this management plan to get information about the size of the protected area. We also visit the Forest Atlas platform, Cameroon Forest Atlas platform, to see where forest management units were located. So to have an idea on land use management in Cameroon, which type of land use do we have in that specific area? And do we have some overlaps between these lands, or what are the distance between maybe forest management units, indigenous community land, and protected area? So this is an example of what we produce using all these type of data to accompany our story. We also use other type of data, like you can see on the next slide. When we went on field, we took the elephant rampages because the company of Clear, you will see in the red square there, there is a portion of land that have been clear is in that area, 11 kilometers from the villages called Nazareth. It's an indigenous community village. So there in Nazareth, where you can see, like you can see on this slide, in these images, in these satellite images, the village called Nazareth is just 11 kilometers from the portion of forest that has been clear. And around, we have the national park. The green line is at the line of the Campoman National Park in Cameroon. And in Campoman National Park, we have a lot of endangered species like elephant, gorilla, that are really protected in endangered species. And since the company have cleared this portion of forest, so in our research, we found that the portion of forest that have been cleared used to be the elephant corridor of the elephant corridor, the national Campoman National Park elephant corridor. So since the portion of forest that have been cleared, elephants do not know how to work anymore, and they just destroy community plantation, like you will see on red, the damages in green, in yellow, but the yellow mark elephant rampages. So combining field trip data with data we export from the management forest national Campoman National Management Plan, we combine these two data, and this help us to show the location of elephant rampages and the location of elephant habitat data, and really know that there are connection between elephant rampages and elephant habitat data due to the deforestation that happened in that Campoman area, which is not far from the protected area and also not far from indigenous forest communities called Bagili communities. We also use other type of data like
Madeleine.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we are running a bit behind the time. I'm wondering if you could maybe jump to the conclusion. Yeah,
okay.
I'm so sorry. Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. So as you say, we have started imaging data, growth that data, and about the challenges, which is the next, the last slide. We have the challenges like accessing to scientist data, access to scientific review, and also sometimes there are lack of collaboration between investigative journalists and scientists. And it's also difficult sometimes for journalists to really quickly understand this scientist data. So it would be good if there were a possibility to really collaborate, to have more collaboration between scientists and investigative journalists, to have more in-depth reports on forest issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. It was really good to hear all about, in detail about the data use that, I think that's really useful for the scientists. And there's actually lots of questions coming in. So hopefully we can cover at least some of them. In the meantime, I want to invite Ita to come in to ask a few questions from our side, and then we will move on to the Q&A.
Yes, excellent, Rina. And thank you, Madeleine and Alexandra, for sharing this really interesting and exciting insights into your work. So I have a couple of questions, the same question for both of you, and then you will quickly respond to that. And my first question is, how do you decide which scientific organizations, sources, and/or tools to work with? And how do journalists and scientists find each other when they are interested in working together? So let's start with Alexandra. Please share your insight, and then we'll go to Madeleine.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's often kind of random to start with. It's kind of you just, from my experience, you kind of Google what you're looking for. So as I mentioned, I was just looking for data on deforestation driven by the beef industry. Couldn't really find much. Came across Trace because they'd done it on other commodities, and basically, journalists, we just get in touch with anyone. So we just email them and say, I'm a journalist, I'm working for this organization, I'm looking into this. Are you working on this, or do you know anyone who's working on this? And most of the time people are so helpful and reply even if they don't know, and they say, oh well, you might be able to speak to this person or whatever. And then so we got in touch with Trace, and luckily it turned out that they were working on this. You get, I guess, in terms of trust and reputability, you just Google them to see what's been written about them or what studies they've done in the past. And also you're often speaking to lots of people in the field, and they will know if they're reputable. So I was also talking to other researchers at other lots of other NGOs and kind of people with a lot of experience in this field, and they would say, oh, you should talk to Trace, or Trace are doing really good work on this, or so that makes you kind of feel quite comfortable with it. So that's and then often you end up with a working relationship that just keeps developing, because you do one story together, and then they either do some more research that they send you, or you, next time you're doing a story, you say, oh, do you have anything on this, or could you give me some advice or some background knowledge, background information on this. So I was kind of talking to some of the people from Trace just on a kind of monthly or having video calls at least once a month or every other month with some of them, and they're so helpful, and it just kind of is normally an organic process.
Excellent, thank you very much, Alexandra. And Madeleine?
Yes, it's almost the same process. Yes. Googling, but what I will add is that I also use my previous work, so like previous network of experts I have with the past reports. So based on those experts I used to discuss with and collaborate with, I can look for other experts, other scientists that have credibility and that produce accurate work, accurate data. So I also use the network, adding to what Alexandra just shared.
Excellent, thank you. If I have time, I can add one more question, Rina. The second question is how to best how to best collaborate, how can scientific communities best collaborate with investigative journalism? And I would like to link that questions with a question in the chat box from Georg. If you are also currently collaborating with university researchers and how you see the interrelation between your work and academic research. I start with Madeleine and then Alex.
I would say specifically with, thank you for the question, specifically with the university, not yet for my case, but with other scientists, other organizations like C4 and other scientific organizations, we do collaborate. And we really like that to improve the collaboration. If they have, it's possible to have some platform of collaboration, because for what I know is like from a consultancy that you met scientists, or from some conference you met with scientists, but in the Congo Basin region, I'm not sure for now we have a real organized platform where journalists, investigative journalists, can discuss and share freely information and data with scientific, or get some data from scientists. So there are possibility to build connection between this organization and have a platform where they can meet, discuss, and share information. It could be good.
Excellent. Alex, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. And I would say I didn't work with anyone at universities when I was at the Bureau. I have been working with a couple of researchers at a university on a story at the Financial Times. And it's a very similar kind of process, really. I think I always find that scientists and researchers at universities always are normally very happy to speak to us, whether that's sharing their data for us to cover it or include it in a story, which is obviously good publicity for their research, and also helps us because it powers our stories and gives it information that we need. But also in terms of just trying to find out about things, they're always usually very happy to be interviewed or to give background information because they're an expert on it. So I think it's always a very fruitful relationship that kind of benefits both parties. And in terms of how to best kind of work with journalists, I would say find journalists that are working in the field that you are kind of researching, and email them if you want to collaborate with them and let them know about your research. And I guess my tip would be, don't send it as a press release, kind of, because we get so many press releases, we just ignore them. And so send it as a personal email. And if you don't hear back, maybe chase once or twice, because things just get lost because we get so many emails. Yeah, obviously it's a fine line, but I think chasing a few times is always, to get noticed is always worth it. And then it's it's great for us to work with you. So yeah, that's what I
Excellent. Yes, thank you very much. And Rina, we have several questions in the Q&A box. Maybe we can pick a couple of them.
Yeah, sure. So we have quite a lot, and
yes.
I'm just going to read out two and then see, both Madeleine and Alexandra can jump in and answer those questions. So one question from Ida: how to have more substantial support and resources for investigative journalism to address the core issue of environmental and social crime, such as deforestation, in order to report on the governance and company structure of bad players and their links to the financial institutions and ultimate beneficiaries. We also have another question, actually a very similar question, one from Daniela and Prem, focusing on the what kind of threats, have you experienced any kind of threats or uncomfortable situation during your investigation? Yeah. Any of you might want to jump in, would be really good to have your answer.
Do you want to go, Madeleine?
Yeah, I will jump in on the pressure. And yes, we do have some pressure when investigating on this company trying to greenwash their activities. And for my own case, what I usually do is when I have to investigate, when I'm doing an investigation, I try to have a backup. Like if there's a trade union of journalists, I try to discuss with them to tell them, okay, I'm working on just general idea about the topic, and also try to work with a group of lawyers that can support me when I feel harassed or when I have some problem. But the company try to intimidate. It's not really direct, but they try to intimidate by maybe when they publish the story, they can, when we get asked for interview, they will not respond. But when the story be published, they will just say, okay, send somebody to call you and ask for your availability to have an interview. So they will say we are available to share more information about this issue or the other issue. But before that, sometimes they don't accept to discuss with us. When we publish the story, they try to come and say we have more information to share with you and so on. But we also try to say, okay, maybe we are not working on this topic anymore. On next time we'll have other opportunity to discuss with you. There are always pressure, and when doing investigation, we try to make sure we are working in a secure way.
Yeah, I mean, I think Madeleine's obviously working in the country where this deforestation is happening, and so is really on the front line of all of this, and so it's absolutely commendable that you do this, and it's very it is a brave thing to do, to undertake investigative reporting when there is such a kind of wealth at stake for these companies, and so much that they're going to lose if you kind of keep kind of exposing what they're doing. We as the reporters in London at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, we didn't face any threats because I think we're based in London. But Reporter Brazil, we have faced a lot of threats, and they've had their offices broken into and lots of things over the years. And that was one of the reasons I think that they were keen to collaborate with us and The Guardian, especially The Guardian in our series, because The Guardian is a really big international publication with huge reach, and so it's good to have their kind of backing in sense of, you know, they can cover any threats that Reporter Brazil might receive, and in terms of legal backlash, obviously The Guardian has more funds than a small investigative reporting outlet for any cases. So so it's really the people usually that are in the country where it's going on. So I can't really give an experience of that. So but that Reporter Brazil definitely did. And then the other question was on resources, I think, for getting more resources for this kind of journalism. It's a really interesting question because things have changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years. Budgets for investigative journalism in newspapers, they're kind of getting better now, but for a long time, what with the rise of social media and the internet and the kind of the demise of print circulation, newspapers just didn't really have any money to be doing the kinds of investigations they were before the rise of the internet. And the Bureau was set up as a non-profit, as a kind of new way of funding investigative journalism about 10 years ago, or just over that, which is a kind of model borrowed from the US, where there have been non-profit investigative journalism outlets for a while. And the idea was that, you know, this is really important to democracy and society, so can it be charitably funded? And that's the model that the Bureau is working on, and more philanthropic organizations that fund this kind of work are getting used to the idea of funding journalism, as opposed to, especially investigative journalism, as a charitable thing. And that's kind of the model that the Bureau uses. And I'm not sure about your publication, Madeleine.
Excellent. Yes. For the sake of time, we should stop here, and there are, you know, lots of questions in the chat box. But first, I would like to thank the speakers for sharing their interesting, exciting work with us. And thank you, Alex. Thank you, Madeleine, for this great effort. And yeah, so we will send all your questions to Alex and Madeleine via email. And we will also try to address them in a blog post. that will produce from this session. So the next, so we have coffee break, and then we'll meet at 11. And thank you very much. See you soon.